I've looked high and low through this house, but can I find it? No, I can't. To be truthful, I can't remember the last time I used that knitting basket, but I promised to teach our Martha to knit a scarf for her Teddy. My granddaughter, Martha, she's only 6. It's funny how all the old names come back. Cute as a button. I taught her mother to knit when she was a girl, but she reckons she's forgot. You know, knitting for toys, that takes me back. Christmas morning, 1941. I was thrilled to ribbons. I had received a doll, and my Auntie Louie had knitted all the doll's clothes, and it was pink. Oh, and the bonnet had all the lovely white fluffy fur around it. You know, knitting was an automatic thing in our life in them days. Family never sat down without knitting. They didn't sit and do nothing. When I look back, my granny and them, they were always knitting one way or another. Well, I call her my granny, although she was my great aunt. She knitted all the socks for the family and our gloves for winter. If we weren't well and we went out, she got this great black scarf, great long thing. It used to be wrapped around you at the back and pinned with a great big safety pin. And that was to keep your kidneys warm and your chest. I remember that big black scarf always. On marriage in 1954, I started to have my own children, but there was only one wage coming in. So we used to go to the jumble sales, pick the best wool jumpers. Well, not just me, our neighbours too, all of us. We would unpick the jumpers. We would wind them around a chair. We would tie them with a different coloured wool. We would wash them, roll them into balls, and then knit them up again. So knitting has always been in my life. Oh God, I do laugh nowadays when they goes on about recycling. I mean, we recycled them days. We had to, couldn't afford anything else. Anyway, I cannot sit here gassing. I've got to lay my hands on that knitting basket and make a start on that teddy scarf before our Martha gets back from school.
Yeah, well, my house, there isn't one room that hasn't got something in it. One of the bedrooms has got a big loom in it. My 4 boys have all flown the nest now, so I'm on my own. But it doesn't matter. I have a lovely time sitting here knitting. I haven't been bored and I haven't been miserable because I'm doing something. I mean, look at what I've got. I've got something really fantastic. Been in Devon for 20 odd years now, but I originate from Stepney Green on the district line. There were wool shops near our flat. I can remember having wool put by. They did that all the time then. You'd want to knit something that had caught your eye and you'd come home with 1 or 2 balls and then the rest would be put by with your name on. And then as you got the money, you went in and you bought another ball. Learned to knit when I was 4. Doll's clothes. Oh, I had suitcases full of doll's clothes. My uncle was the knitter. It was my uncle who taught me to knit. I mean, my mum could knit, but she loved sewing. But no, my uncle, he used to knit. Pharaoh and Aaron. He had great big thick fat fingers, and he'd be sitting there knitting, and all these women would snigger at him. Then they'd look at what he was knitting, and that'd shut him up. He was a bachelor. I don't know how he took to knitting. Nah, never asked him. Never know now, will I? Cables. Oh, he knew all the names of all the cables. Knitted for himself mostly. He was a printer. He was taken into the family business. Yeah, he would have been better going to university and spreading his wings. I think the most exciting time of his life was the war. He went abroad. He mixed with other people. I remember he used to go to the reunions up the West End. God, always knitting. He was always knitting. It's funny, I've been thinking about him only today, and I dug this pattern out. It was the last thing he made. I can remember it was this time of year. He went out, and it was on the news that old people should not go out in the cold. So my uncle went up into town, went to Harrods to buy himself a knitting pattern. So anyway, kept it to remind me. It's a V-neck sleeveless top. There was a receipt inside, 35 pence. So he never got married, ever. I'm knitting it up for my youngest, his Christmas jumper. Oh, we'll wear it at the Christmas dinner table, and I bet it won't see the light of day after that. I don't mind. I still like knitting for my boys.
Well, Edith from the Thursday Club is organising a charity knit for Christmas. At this week's meeting, she pulled me up on my Scottish credentials. Well, she said, Greta Heron, if you really were a muir before you got married, what with your family coming from the Orkneys and all that, then by rights, you should be able to knit me up a decent fair isle. I feel I've opened me mouth too wide this time and stuck me foot right in it. I mean, why, oh, why did I ever say I could knit fair isle? I mean, I used to be able to. Me auntie taught me, but can I now? I've always been involved, as far back as I can remember, with people who are clever. And I'm not. But I tell you what, Edith Saunders, I'm always up for a challenge. And guess what? I've made a start. Well, my name is Greta Heron or Greta Heron or whatever you want to call me. I am a muir, actually. My grandfather came down from the Orkneys. He was a seagoing captain, and my daddy followed in the family line. But he moved down to Liverpool, but they have their own small holding in the Orkneys, actually, with sheep, so well into wool. Well, my auntie, my daddy's unmarried sister, oh, she was a wonderful woman, wonderful. She'd have me sit and she'd unravel all those seamen's socks and all the rest of it, because my daddy, he used to bring them home from the ships, actually. And so she'd have me sit and she'd run this wool round me hands and then it'd be washed and stuck out in the backyard. And then she taught me to knit because she could make all kinds of Norwegian fantastic patterns and the like. She could knit it all and she taught me everything. Well, we always went to school in a kilt because I was a muir and we had our own tartan. used to have to go to the Edinburgh kilt shop and used to get a clip. It was like a claw. Oh, well, I used to hate it actually, but that was all part of it. It was all part of the get-up. And then my auntie had knit me up a jumper to go with it all. And well, that was me all set for school. Well, at school, I was hopeless at sewing. We used to have to make a domestic science apron, and the teacher, she got me out the front of the class and she said, "Look at this. It's Greta Heron's domestic science apron." And honestly, kid, it was disgusting. It was all like black and in holes, and I took it up. Yeah, before that though, all the kids, they were like smirking behind their hands. And I stood there, this titchy, toothy kid, hating the teacher and everyone else. Well, I took it home to me auntie. She took one look at it. She walloped me round the kitchen with it. She said, "Girl, this is what I paid 3 bob for. I wouldn't use it for a duster." Well, I suppose I better crack on. If my auntie could see me now, she'd give me what for showing off in front of everyone, tell them what a wonderful knitter I was. Now, where was I?
Thanks, Alan. Watch how you go. There's some nasty weather on the way. That's Alan, our postman. He deserves a medal for delivering to remote farms like ours. I know what this is. We have relations in Canada, you see, who always send us a Christmas parcel. We call it our Canadian Christmas parcel. We always send something back in return. Done it since I can remember. To start with, they could only afford to send hand-me-downs. Well, there were 4 of us, 4 children, all girls. And we would go through these things. Who was it going to fit? And if it didn't fit, we undid it and made it up into something else. We always loved that. It became our tradition, and we still get a Canadian Christmas parcel to this day. Oh, this is what I'm sending. You see these mittens? I've hand knitted them, and the wool has been spun from the sheep on my farm. A flock that I have hand reared. I didn't grow up on a farm. I grew up in Manchester, but I always wanted to be a farmer. We spent all our summers in the Lake District, you see. Oh, we loved it. Wow, the outside life, the animals, the mountains. Oh, the colours were absolutely fantastic. But every autumn we'd have to go home. We'd have to go back to Manchester because my father worked in Manchester, but all of us wanted to get back to the lakes. Wasn't until I got married that I finally got back. We came to the lakes, me and Ron, and got a small holding. So I got my farm. It's a very small farm. Not long after, our eldest son was born. It's a marvellous place for the children. We've got 4. They're all born here and brought up as Cumbrians. I had 8 acres and various creatures, cattle, goats, hens, rabbits. Eventually, I had sheep,
I got very interested in the rare breeds, the rough mountain sheep that you find on the hill farms in Cumbria. So I went to the market and I bought myself 2. I called them Beryl and Sandra, after the liver birds. They were the beginning of my flock. Oh, it's very satisfactory, you know, to actually breed an animal and then follow through right to the end garment, like I did with these mittens. Right from lambing in the spring, and then the following year you clip it in say July, when it's warm enough and long enough for the sheep to lose their jackets. You've got this beautiful lamb's fleece. You must do something with it. If you want to, you can dye it. I did that with Sandra's first lovely fleece. Oh, I dyed it all these beautiful colours, purple and pink and blue, knitted it up on huge needles. The coat I have on is from Sandra. We call it my Sandra coat. All this from one sheep, a fleece that's worth about £2 into a gorgeous coat that I've used for 20 years now. I became a bit of a regular at the sheep markets. I bought different breeds. Well, it built up, really. The local farmers thought I was daft. They called it a motley flock. But from time to time, Dennis, who's got the big farm next door to me, and the other farmers around here, they would phone up and they would say, Betty, we have this sheep. Would you like it? I always said yes. And I added another one to my motley flock. They graze just outside my kitchen window, so I can keep an eye on them.
Well, I still haven't laid my hands on that blinking basket. But I tell you what I did find rooting around the cubby hole under the stairs. This. All the families' births, deaths and marriage certificates go in here. And this one is my birth certificate. I was born in Oxford Workhouse. My mother was a devoted Catholic. Supposedly my father was a Christian and he would have married her, but he wouldn't become Catholic. You see, in them days, that was what was done. My mother left me with an aunt. In them days, times was hard, so she went into service. And I was brought up by a great aunt and uncle and their family of 3 boys and 3 girls with a lot of love. And in the end, I called my great uncle Grandpa because of all his grandchildren. And we all lived in a little village called Bampton. When I arrived, supposedly my mother wrote and said she couldn't get out of the workhouse unless we had a home to go to. She was 28 years of age when she had me, so she wasn't a silly girl or anything like that. You know, we were supposed to be the posh people. because we lived on the front of Mount Pleasant, facing Chapel House Road. But before that, I'll tell you about my mother. She didn't come home much, and I got the cuddles from my granny and my aunties. She was talked about, but never as my mother. She was talked about as Auntie Bessie. She did come home, but it wasn't until later that 2 and 2 were put together. Like I say, I got the cuddles off my granny and my aunties. Well, we were supposed to be the posh people because we lived on the front street of Mount Pleasant, facing Chapel House Road. There was the front street, then there was the street behind, and then there were the fields. But if you lived on the front street, you sort of had the best house. We always had a nice cloth on a Sunday lunchtime. And we had a glass water jar on the table. And Grandpa didn't like it if we talked while we had a meal. It wasn't that we were stopped, but he didn't think the table were for chit chat. We had a His Master's Voice gramophone, which we used to wind up, and we learnt to dance on a Sunday with an uncle who instructed us on how to dance using a chair in the living room after Sunday dinner. Oh, I'll tell you another thing. Pig killing were a big event in our house. The butcher from Bampton store used to call down and shoot it in the garden. The pig used to be put up on 3 poles and hung in the street. And my granny used to go down on all 4s and catch all the blood. And whoops, the kitchen was just taken over completely. I mean, the black puddings was made, offals was made into a sausage. The pig hung there till about 3 or 4 o'clock. Then the butcher would come back and it was brought into the kitchen where it was cleaned and salted. And then it would be laid into the best sheets of the house in the wash house. It was there for 6 weeks. We couldn't go in. It was locked. See, if you went in, you would spoil the bacon. And after the 6 weeks, the butcher would come back and it hung on our stairs leading up our bedroom on hooks. Upstairs, spare bedroom. I bet that's where that basket's been hiding. There's all sorts up there. I'll lay money on that's where I'll find it.
Down to Devon in 1999. Just me and the 4 boys. Youngest was 2 and the eldest was 11. I had to earn a living. I wanted to look after my children. So I did a guest house. I had to get away from London. I had the boys. I was a good secretary with a big firm. I was good. But I couldn't put up with the situation at home. I had to get away. We had 4 boys. It was when he threw a kettle full of boiling hot water over me. I had to go. I moved here. And I don't hide it. I mean, why should I hide it? There's millions of women have been through it. I think people should talk about it. It's nothing I need to hide. He followed me here. Drive down at weekends, ignored the restraining order, Used to sit outside in that Audi. He never paid a penny towards his kids, and he had a good business. Used to sit outside at weekends. I was fully booked, blocked the drive. Well, I just built another drive. Couldn't block 2 drives, could he? The B&B was a converted barn with a little cottage attached. So me and the boys had half, and the other half I let out to guests. Yeah, it was lovely. Hard work, you know, but lovely people stayed, really lovely people. So my youngest, he's got a hair lip and a cleft palate. So we had lots and lots of operations, and they nearly always happened in the winter. You know, we arranged it so that I could take time out from work to look after him. And I would get all these phone calls and letters from all over the country asking how he was. It was just lovely. He's 29 now and he's fine. When I did the guest house, I used to knit, you know, and sell little bits and pieces. You know, I did jumpers, little things that would catch people's eye. You know, a hobby that would pay for itself. I mean, if you want nice yarn, you need money. And if you've got 4 boys, you've never got any. So the boys all flew the nest. And my youngest said, oh, this B&B lark's a lot of hard work. You should do something with your knitting. Now, you never stop knitting or weaving or spinning. You should do something with it. Turn your hobby into a business. So I did. Found a place in an old mill. That's how it started. I had a tiny little unit, 3 rooms that were so small. So I knocked a wall down. Worked much better. Then I knocked the other wall down. Made a go of it. Sold my knitting and weaving, and I did classes. Oh, I'm running a class for the local school tomorrow. They're making snow angels out of a fleece I got from a local sheep farm. I better crack on with this then.
I've lost me way again. If my auntie could see me now, she put me on the right track. She brought me up, you see, me auntie, my daddy's unmarried sister. Now, there's a tale. When I was 9, my mother gave me away. Well, my mother and father had separated, and my daddy had gone off with somebody else, and he was always off at sea anyway. So I was left on my own. So she walked me to an estate at Norris Green, and she left me at a path. Well, a lady came up the path. I can see it now, actually. She took me into the house. I had no idea who she was. She never said anything. She sat me down and she gave me a glass of milk and a slice of bread and butter. Well, I'd just come back from school and I was starving, actually. And then when I'd eaten, she said, well, we better be off. So she took me by the hand and she led me down the path, out the gate and down the street. And we waited for a bus. Well, it took an eternity, actually. And we got on the bus and it ended up at the pier head. And then I was taken onto a big ship. Well, I was only 9. I thought it was a big liner. Turned out to be the Mersey ferry. Then we got off somewhere, Birkenhead. And then we had to go on another journey, on another bus. And well, by this time it was getting dark and I was quite terrified, actually. I mean, well, this lady, she seemed very pleasant, but I had no idea where we were going. we ended up at this great big house on the Wirral. Well, it was like a big old Victorian house, actually. It turned out it belonged to the local doctors. And my auntie happened to be the housekeeper. So thereafter, I was known as the doctor's girl. There were 16 rooms in that house. And I remember my auntie, she pushed open a big heavy wooden door with like a big brass knob. I can see it now, actually. And she led me down into a little passage, into a big kitchen. And she sat me down. She gave me a glass of cocoa. Oh, it was lovely, actually. And then when I'd finished, she said, well, better get you into bed, me girl. So she led me upstairs and we had to push open the door. And the stairs, they like turned and it was like a turkey red carpet. And she led me into this massive bathroom. And then when I'd had a wash, I was put into bed. Little did I know, when I fell asleep that night, I'd sleep in that bed for the next 15 years. Which is about how long it's going to take me to finish this. Come on, where are you? Where's that flipping stitch? Oh, there it is. Crack on, Greta. You're going to finish this if it kills you.
Yan tan tetherer, another sock begun. Yan tan tetherer, me work is never done. We're cows to milk and bairns to feed and plenty more besides. Yan tan tetherer, we work till eventide. It's done. I shall parcel this up for Alan the postie tomorrow. And the wool from my Herdwick sheep will wing its way from the Cumbrian hills across the ocean to Canada. In the Lake District, you see, ours are rough mountain sheep. Herdwick, mostly. Oh, the best thing about Herdwick sheep is that the ewes teach their lambs the lie of the land. You see, each flock has its own patch on the mountain, and every generation of sheep, the ewes teach their lambs how to find their own particular patch. Well, the way it goes is the ewes come down off the fell when they're lambing in the spring, and then when the lambs are strong enough, led by their mums to show them the way, they go up to about 3,000 feet to their own patch on the mountain. Yeah, it's traditional farming. It's been going on for hundreds and hundreds of years. The ewes teach their lambs how to follow them, and so it goes down through the generations of sheep. They pass that knowledge on. When foot and mouth hit us, 2001, oh, it's devastating for us in Cumbria. Countless sheep were killed, even the healthy ones, to try and stop it spreading. My motley flock all had to be killed. And Dennis in the big farm next door to me, he lost everything. He lost his Herdwick. Gone. No ewes to teach lambs. They were all gone. Oh. after the cull was over, out of nowhere, really, these 6 old ratchers, what we call old ewes round here, these 6 old ratchers came down off the fell looking for food. For some unknown reason, they weren't included in the cull. Dennis recognised them by the marking. They were his. He was allowed to put them into a sheep pen high up on the fell, but he wasn't allowed to go between them and his farm because of the restrictions. So I got myself this job to do. I would go up and feed them these 6 old ewes every day in the pouring rain, climbing up 1,000 feet with hay and food for them. And eventually the foot and mouth restrictions were lifted and things started to get back to normal. But when you miss a generation, you see, tradition gets lost. In the case of the Herdwick, the Heft was lost. You know, the ewes teaching lambs where their patch was. Dennis had to buy in a whole new flock of Herdwick ewes. After lambing, though, those 6 old ratchers that I'd had to look after taught Dennis's new sheep the Heft. Oh, can you credit it? Those 6 old ratchers appearing out of the blue.
Well, I found the knitting basket at last and made a start. Martha's grandpa, she calls him Grandpa Joe, cheeky monkey. He's gone to pick her up from school. So I better look sharp before they get back. You know, the first night I took my Joseph, as I call him, home to my granddad's house, he had missed the bus and it only ran every hour and it was raining. So I said, oh, I am not standing here in the rain. You're coming home. So went in, doors never locked in them days. You just walked in. And me granny says, well, what shall I give him to eat while we're waiting? What for his supper? And if he was here now, he would tell you his eyes nearly popped out of his head because me granddad says, well, fry him some bacon. And me granddad, he goes on the stairs and he brings down this great big ham and he slices off a big lump. And my husband, well, he just looked. I mean, he couldn't, well, he'd never seen bacon like that. It was still on ration. So that was his introduction to my granny and grandpa, was that night. We got married about 10 or 11 months later, 1954. Oh, I had a lovely wedding. Reception was in the church hall. Do you know, I was only thinking about it the other day. Elderberry wine. We had elderberry wine, whiskey and port, and a barrel of beer. When they came to knock the old family house down, Grandpa was on his own. And an aunt had moved in to look after him, but the houses were deemed unfit, so they had to go into council property. See, our house was on the front of Mount Pleasant, facing Chapel House Road, so they were the first to go. knocked them down one by one. Until they came to ours. You see, Grandad had built the wash house himself. Now that wash house, where they used to cure the bacon, they could not knock it down. It had been so well built, they had to get a bulldozer thing in to get rid of it. Refusing to be knocked down it was. When she's home and we're knitting, I'm going to tell our Martha about Grandad's wash house. I'm going to tell her, if you build something strong enough, nothing and no one will ever knock it down. So you be like that wash house, my girl. She probably won't understand a word I'm talking about. Later on she will. Do mark my words. Well, it's beginning to look rather bonny. She'll be pleased as punch with that. And I've got these little needles so she can have a go herself. Oh, bless her.
Working in my unit, I started to meet other women through the guild of spinners, weavers and dyers. So we all got our heads together. Then 3 years ago, we joined forces and set up a place together. It's lovely. We all have our own space, and then there's the cafe next door. Oh yeah, it's going from strength to strength. We haven't looked back. Well, individually, we wouldn't be able to have a space as big as that, but together we can. There's 15 of us. We have a place where our stuff's displayed. We split the work between us. That works quite well. We always say we're a very mixed group, quite forceful women. And when you mention a cooperative, you hear people on the other end of the phone go, and you say, I will give you an answer by this afternoon. And they say, are you sure? And you say, yes. People don't expect that from a cooperative. Well, together, we're really strong. You could say we're like a well-spun yarn. So, first of all, before you start, you've just got this fleece and you wonder what the hell you're going to do with it. But then you pull the end of the roll out onto the spindle to spin it. And because it's spun, it's strong. I mean, it's so strong, you can't even break it sometimes. That's strong. Then, normally you put 2 threads together, plying. So 2 threads, and then you spin them opposite ways. And when you put 2 together, it goes straight. 1 thread takes the spin out of the other. You want it straight, then you've got your yarn. And then you either weave it or knit it to make it into a garment. It's fascinating. You get hooked. So that's us, a well-spun yarn. Don't know what it is, but, you know, we've hit on something. People like things made by hand. They're real skills, natural yarns. I think it's 2 generations that have missed out on knitting. When I first moved down here, I would teach spinning and weaving in schools, and they'd say, oh no, mummy doesn't knit, but grandma does. Now, it's fantastic. People are knitting wherever they are. I mean, prominent people are knitting, aren't they? You know, like Judi Dench. Apparently, she knits in her dressing room. And that Tom Daly and his Union Jack cardigan. Oh, I wish my uncle was here to see that. I think he would have loved that. I really do.
Look, it's turning out quite nicely, actually. Not bad. I think my auntie must be up there chivvying me along. I'm determined to get this finished in time for the Thursday Club's Christmas do. We're having it at the Fox and Goose this year, Saturday next. Apparently they put on a really nice spread, so that'll be something good to look forward to. Oh, the run up to Christmas, well, always reminds me of the doctor's house. Me auntie running round the kitchen, fixing things up, making the mince pies and all that. This particular Christmas, oh, must have been about 10 or 11. I was still in bed, pitch black. And I could feel around with me feet. Books, books, books. And they were in a pillowcase. And of course, when the light went on, I could open them. What child now would be happy with second-hand books on a Christmas morning? But I was allowed to stay in bed all day that day. And I could read from 8 in the morning till dinner time, because we always had dinner in the evening, doctor's shifts, you see. And in that pillowcase, there was one bar of Bourneville's dark chocolate. And I was allowed 1 square a day that week. And I ate dark chocolate, actually. But my auntie was doing her best. She wanted me to get on with life and do well. Wonderful sacrifice. Because Dr. Bewley, he was quite a demanding man, let me tell you. Did you ever see Dr. Finley's case book? Many is the time I saw my auntie come along the passage in tears. She put up with a lot. Let's just say he used to drink. But I've come to realise it was her home. You know, even after I'd left and got married, she'd never have left. She was bringing up a little girl. It was her home. But look what she taught me. Before I leave you, I must tell you about another little incident that happened to me. I was going up to see another little auntie who lived up in the Orkneys, and she bumped into a man she knew in Kirkwall on the main street. So she said to him, "Oh, this is Greta from the soup. She was a mule before she married." And he glared down at me and he said, "Are you the sur, the dur, or the poor?" Well, she took one look at him and pulled herself up to her full 5 feet and said, "Poor she might be, but she is none of the other 2. And she stormed right off. And I thought, aye, he's off her Christmas list. Now, better crack on with this. Not bad, is it, kid, for a titchy, toothy girl? I'll show that Edith Saunders and the Thursday Club who's a mule.
Ask any farmer these days. You can't just rely on rearing sheep to make a living. To keep the farm going, you have to look at other ways of bringing the money in. Foot and mouth hit us so badly, you see. I was determined to pick up the pieces, so I applied for a government grant. A fair few of us got grants, all sheep farmers, all women. People started calling us the Herdwick women. Well, we all had one thing in mind: get our farms back up and running. So, a few years ago now, we used our grant money and set up a sheep and wool festival. It's a real success. We do it every year now. Fleece and wool producers, knitters and crafters are there. They're all selling their wares and running workshops. It's absolutely grown since we started. People come from all over. Really, knitting, weaving, crafting, it's come around again, you see. We put natural wools back onto the table. And people get it. Oh, they get that it's real. It's rooted in the past, tradition. People don't always want cheap and disposable anymore. They'll pay a bit more for something handmade that will last. Well, I've worn that cardie my granny knitted me for years now. I hope one day one of my granddaughters will still be wearing the Sandra coat. In a way, we're a bit like those old ratchers, us Herdwick women. Those 6 old ratchers that taught Dennis's new sheep how to find their way across the mountain. Through thick and thin, whatever life throws at you, you have to keep going, you see. You find your way through. Along the way, do the best you can to help those that follow you find their way through. Yam, tam, tether, another flock begun. Yam, tam, tether, the work is never done. With sheep to shear and fleece to spin and plenty more besides. Yam, tam, tether, we knit at eventide.